To really understand the story, or maybe how it happened, you need to know a few things. I live in Belgium, and at the time of the events, in 2018, I lived at home with my parents, my older brother, and my sister, and my sweet dog. Looking back now, maybe my dog is a bit too sweet. Also important to note is that my family is all over the place. Everybody is always busy doing something. Everyone has a very different rhythm, and some days, we live next to each other instead of with each other. So that is why at the time I didn't really know who was home and who wasn't. We do love each other. So in 2018, on a school night, I woke up to some noises in my room. I was confused and looked at my phone. It was around 3 a.m. You know that feeling when you wake up very abruptly and don't know if you're dreaming or awake? That was kind of how I felt. There's a streetlight right at my window, so even though the curtains were closed, I could still make out some silhouettes and figures. As I had just woke up and wasn't really thinking, I thought the silhouette I saw in my room was my older brother. I was sleep drunk, as you could call it, and started asking him what he was doing, but he didn't really react. I saw him walking towards my jewelry, and I asked him again what he was doing. Again, my brother didn't respond. I was still laying in bed and I began to feel angry because I had school the next day and had to get up early. And as you do with irritating siblings, I started to curse him out. Get the F out, I have school tomorrow. This time he looked at me, but again didn't say anything. He started to walk toward my handbag and started looking in it and taking things out. At this point I was just angry at my brother, and finally got out of bed. Mind you, the lights are still off. I walked towards him and asked again, "What the F are you doing? Get out." And I physically started pushing him slightly towards the door. Then he spoke. "Where's the money? Where's the money?" In this very strange, almost fake accent. And seriously, I started laughing it off. I still thought it was my brother. "Okay, I don't know if you're drunk or just being an asshole, but get out." By this time, we were almost at the door. I was still pushing him out. He left, and I closed the door. Finally, I thought as I went back to bed. But I started feeling unsettled. I got nervous and scared and started thinking it over. Didn't I smell cigarettes? My brother doesn't smoke. Why would he act so strange? So just to be sure, I texted my brother, "Where are you?" His answer made my heart sink to my knees. "I just left the gym. I'll be home in a minute." I immediately called him and frantically explained there was just someone in my room. I started crying as I was panicking and asking him what to do. He said to call the police and stay in my room. As the gym was really close to our home, my brother came home like literally a minute or two later. I was still upstairs on the phone with the police while I heard my brother yell a whole lot of curse words and "get out." At this point, I was in the upstairs hallway because my sister woke up and was standing there too. My father fell asleep downstairs on the couch, so when he heard my brother scream, he immediately woke up and knew something was wrong. He went to the downstairs hallway and saw my brother chasing the intruder. At this point, they were already at the front door. My brother managed to take a backpack from the intruder, but sadly he got away and fled. My brother did get a good look at him too. So, the police came and I was actually in shock. All this time my mother was asleep because she's on strong sleep meds. She woke up during the chase when my sister and I were standing in the hallway. I was crying and she came up to us. I frantically told her what had happened and she said, "No, little one, that was a very bad dream." That's one of the things we still laugh about today. While we were talking to the police, we had to describe the person. I told them exactly what had happened and how he looked. Due to the streetlight, I could see the clothes he was wearing. He had a hood on, so I didn't see his face, and when I was close, he always turned his back toward me. So I'm telling the police lady about his black pants and green hoodie. Then she abruptly stopped me. "Green? Your brother said light gray." That's the second time my heart dropped to my knees. There were two guys, not one. Both my brother and I were 100% sure about what we saw. So there had to have been two guys. They took a few iPads, phones, and wallets. But luckily my brother took the backpack where there was a lot more valuable things they didn't get away with. But the burglars were kinda stupid because we still had Find My on all our Apple devices and they were still running. A day later, when we saw the location, my brother jumped in his car with my father while on the phone with the police. Really, my brother is a badass. Going to the gym at night. He's in the military, chasing intruders through the house. I wouldn't fuck with him. They waited for the police and they went in the house where the location of our devices were and found one guy. He was crying and covered in his own piss and puke. They arrested him and he confessed. He said he was high on drugs and it was the first time he ever did something like that. He was very panicky and crying the whole time. My brother recognized him as the intruder he chased, so that meant the guy who was in my room was still out there. The guy snitched on the other guy, but he was nowhere to be found. We all kinda got on with our lives. I was really scared. I slept with my lights on for more than a year, and every time I would wake up past 3 a.m., I couldn't go to sleep anymore. The intruder they caught went to jail for a year. He was a first-time offender, and is now in a rehab program. He has sent us a letter or two, with our consent, and we kind of feel bad for him. He was traumatized too, but half a year ago, we heard the second man was taken into custody. It was finally over. I mean, it wasn't as bad as the beginning, but of course, I still got scared sometimes. But now they finally caught the man who was in my room. What we found out was unsettling to say the least. Well, the dude that pissed himself didn't have a record before this happened. The dude who was in my room was a very experienced criminal. He had multiple possession charges, theft, drunk driving, and worst of all, assault and attempted homicide. The man I talked to, cursed out, and pushed out of my room at 3 a.m. was dangerous, and I'm very happy to be alive. This happened a few years ago, in my old one-person flat. I had a strange feeling that something wasn't right for a few days, like I was sure that food in the fridge was less than I put back the last time. I found pillows from my couch on the floor, stuff like that. I lived alone back then, so there wasn't anyone else with access to my flat, or so I thought. Well, one night I woke up around 1 in the morning, sweating, and even though I didn't remember, was sure I awoke from a nightmare. Since I was drenched in sweat, I decided to take a shower, so I put my phone up in the bathroom for music, turned on the water, and enjoyed my shower. A few minutes in, I heard the door move. I never close it, but it still never moves. I took a look at the shower curtain and saw a shadow against it, and a look at my phone confirmed someone was there, since I could clearly see a reflection in my screen that showed someone standing next to the shower curtain. It took me a lot not to scream, and to keep acting like I didn't notice anything, while silently taking the shower head off the holding and turning the water all the way to hot. I'm still kind of impressed of that quick thinking. Our water got really hot when you cranked it all the way to hot, and a few seconds later, steam was raising and the water hurt my eyes, flowing to the drain. I turned around, ripped the shower curtain open, and held the shower head right at the person behind. It was a woman. She screamed in pain. I whacked her in the face with the shower head and jumped out of the shower and ran to the door, taking the key out of the lock and locking it closed behind me. A little later, she started to bang on the door, but the door didn't give. Thank God for German quality work. I called the cops and went to the kitchen to get my big kitchen knife, just for safety. I felt like my throat was closing up when I saw it missing and realized there's only one place where it could possibly be right now. The police came and arrested the woman, who turned out to have been the former person living in the flat and was evicted for not paying rent. Seems she made a copy of the key and came into the flat when I was at work and sometimes at night. It's possible that what woke me in the first place was her, and honestly, I don't even want to think about it. Ever since then, I always insist that the locks are changed when I move into a new place. This happened last weekend. My state is still pretty much entirely shut down due to the virus. I am working as an administrative assistant for an organization. I've been working here since I was 16, 18 now. The office where I work is almost completely empty all the time, and it's really eerie from how it was pre-pandemic. The building shares a lobby with a hotel that has little restaurants, shops, art galleries, etc. Before the virus, it was a really lively, happening place all around the clock. So now most of the people in the offices are working from home, and the shops, for the most part, have either gone out of business or are closed. There's still one open coffee shop, but that's about it. So I usually work from home, but I needed the office space this time for things I had to get done. So I went into the office around noon, and it's like a freaking ghost town. Nobody else seems to be in this huge building, and the only sound is the normal lobby music echoing throughout the empty, lifeless building. I get in the elevator and go up to my office and begin work. However, I start to get this off feeling of not being alone in the office, and I get really creeped out. I check around the office and find nothing, and I go back to work. So it's around noon and I hear footsteps in the hallway. Because of the new virus rules, we have to sign in and out of the office in order to do contact tracing. I go into the front office to see if anyone signed in after me, and no one has. I tell myself I'm just being paranoid and get back to work. So I'm focused on my task again, and I hear a door softly shut. My heart starts beating really heavy, and I go back to the front office. No one else has signed in. I decide it's best for me to just leave right then and there, and maybe call my boss and ask him to come back with me to collect my stuff later. So I go down to the lobby, which is still eerie and empty, and I call my boss and ask him what to do because I left my work laptop in there. My boss tells me to do whatever is safest for me, and there is a security guard on duty, to go find him and ask them to walk me out of the lobby to my car and alert them of the issue. So I go to the security desk, and the guard there tells me he's been there all morning and has only seen me and one other person go in the elevators that day, but he didn't know what floor they got off on. I sat there with him for a while, and he sees a person get in the elevator at a floor below mine and leave. He tells me he thinks it's the noises I heard. It was probably just an echo from that person on the floor below me, but if I want, he'll go to the office with me. I tell him that's fine. I'm good. Fragile masculinity over here. And I go back to my office to begin work. I'm working and I again hear footsteps. I look down the hallway but no one is there. I decide it's not worth it for me to stay there, that I'm too freaked out, and I grab my stuff and head out the door into the elevators. It seems like an eternity waiting for the elevator to get to me. I feel like someone is watching me again, and I turn to look towards the office entrance. The next thing that happened freaked me out so badly I couldn't comprehend it. Lo and behold, a very tiny woman, like maybe 5'2"-ish, who I don't recognize, and doesn't work for the company, is peeking through the glass of the office door, and she is totally naked. She makes eye contact with me, and then runs back towards the back office until she is out of view. I'm stunned. It's literally the weirdest thing I've seen in my life. I jump in the elevator and press the lobby button and the shut door button as fast as I can. I go to the security guard and tell him what happened. He says it's impossible that anyone else was in there, because they keep a log of people leaving and entering which floor times, and no one else has entered my floor in 3 days except for my boss. I call my boss and tell him what happened, and he is sufficiently weirded out. Anyways, he, another coworker, and I decided to check out the office the next day together and find that someone had taken all the office snacks in the break room we find in our relaxation office. Office for when people are having a bad day and need a place to relax. A pair of socks and a brush with hair and dried flakes of blood on it, and a grocery bag filled with receipts, coins, and other random junk like thumbtacks, rocks, a small dollar store plushie, and used Q-tips with earwax. But we find no one in the office. So this happened around 5 or 6 years ago to my uncle. He works for a big company which has offices all over the country, so he has been transferred a few times. So this one time he was transferred to a big city. He rented a big truck to move his furniture and other household items. They finished the packing by evening and decided to start the journey by 7 p.m. in the night, so they can reach their destination by morning. My father was accompanying him, so they started their journey. By around 2 or 3 a.m., the truck driver slowed the truck a bit, so my uncle and my father asked what happened. He said that there is a lady standing ahead. She might be asking for help, and that we should check it out. My uncle said, "No, don't stop. We don't have time for all this. Just keep going." He insisted, but my uncle didn't let him stop. So when they reached their destination, he was a bit angry with my uncle and my father and asked him again why he didn't let them help the woman. Then my uncle said, "There was no woman on the road. We didn't see any woman standing on the road. You were the only one who could see her, but we didn't tell you this because, otherwise, you would have been scared, and that would have been bad with you driving, and we were on a highway in the night. The story I'm about to tell you happened yesterday night. I live in Nantes, West France. I'm quite a petite girl, and I avoid confrontation wherever I can. I'm pretty good at it because, since I can remember, I had a very strong sixth sense thing. I try to avoid people who make me anxious. It allowed me to survive some very dangerous situations and prevent one kidnapping, but that is not part of the story. Yesterday, I visited a very close friend of mine. A few days ago, she broke her leg, so I decided to cheer her up by giving her a few gifts. The atmosphere was so nice that I didn't recognize when it got dark outside. Despite the late hour, I decided to go home. I said goodbye to my friend and left her apartment. I was about 40 minutes from home, but I walked this distance many times without any problems, so I thought it would be the same this time. Oh, how wrong I was. Less than 5 minutes passed and I just felt it was going to be hell. I was approaching one of the many bridges in our city. I didn't see anyone around. I thought my senses were playing a trick on me. This has happened before, so I kept going. The bridge was about 20 meters in front of me before I heard a conversation and a giggle. I turned my head slightly and saw 3 men walking towards me. I felt a cold sweat on my back, but it was too late to turn back. I didn't want to show them that I was afraid. I know this type of behavior provokes more harassment. I kept walking, but turned the music down. I didn't take my headphones off because I didn't want them to know about my suspicions. I heard their footsteps behind my back. They were saying something, but I didn't know what, because they were speaking in a different language. I was already on the bridge when they caught up with me. As I said, I'm a petite girl. They were over 180 centimeters tall. They surrounded me. I had no choice but to go ahead. A shudder ran through my body. I didn't know what they wanted or what they were saying, but I felt like I was in danger. They kept talking to me. They leaned over me and whispered something into my ears, and they laughed. This sound will haunt me for the rest of my life. At one point, they noticed I was doing my best to ignore them, and then the worst began. They started making animal noises. It may sound strange and maybe even funny, but it was terrifying to me. They howled, growled, whistled, and kissed the air loudly. They did these things very close to my face. I was desperate, but where would I go? I was on the bridge. I would kill myself if I jumped into the water, or at least break both of my legs if I were lucky. Those 2 minutes to cross the bridge felt like an eternity for me. When we got to the end of the bridge, I was sweating, close to tears. Thought I was going to throw up. I was shaking, which seemed to amuse them even more. And then a miracle happened. Someone called my name. Very loudly. I looked up and saw someone approaching us. He was a very tall man, several years older than me, but I didn't know him. I had no idea who he was or how he knew my name, but it didn't matter at the time. I felt like he was my guardian angel. He came over to us and staring profusely at the 3 strangers. I didn't see their faces, but they fell silent. "What are you doing with my girlfriend?" he asked, still frowning at them. He stretched out his hand in my direction, never taking his eyes off them. "Come on, sweetheart." I didn't wait. I didn't know who he was, why he was helping me, but I didn't care. I gripped his hand tightly and almost nestled against his shoulder. My heart was beating fast and loud, but I was so thankful that he came to help me. 3 strangers and my savior exchanged glances. They were silent. I was starting to panic that they would attack him because he was there alone, and I wouldn't have the strength to help him if they would attack. But it didn't happen. I almost heard their teeth grinding when they muttered something. My savior held my hand tightly and watched them. They turned back and went back on the bridge. We stood in the same place for some time. He looked at me and smiled, and at that moment, my body gave up. I started shaking uncontrollably, and I almost drowned in my own tears. He didn't say a word. He just held my hand and gave me time to cool down. After a long moment, he offered to take me home. We walked slowly and talked about various things. Actually, he was talking all the time. I was just nodding. I found out he was walking near the bridge and noticed the whole scene. He decided to react and help me if it turned out that his assumptions were correct. I asked him how he knew me and how he knew my name. He looked surprised and smiled and said he didn't know my name. He used this name because it's one of the most popular names in our country. When we got home, I was still shaky but happy. I offered him something to drink. I don't live alone, so I wasn't worried about letting him in. But he kindly declined, and we said goodbye. Can't believe how lucky I was. If I hadn't met him, I don't know if I could write about it today. So, thank you. Thank you so much for saving me. I hope to meet you one day. As to those 3 strangers, I hope one day you will understand that your behavior is reprehensible, and you will change your attitude to women who walk alone. And I hope to never meet you again.